My name is Bob Brown, and I'm a proud member of the Board of Directors, and I'm chairman of the Breakfast Briefing Committee. And so in the interest of making good use of your precious time, we're going to get ourselves underway. I would ask you, if you haven't done so already, to put your phones on the silent or vibrate mode, and we will not disturb the proceedings as a result of that. We're delighted to welcome our BGR members here, our guests who are here, elected officials who may have joined us, and we want to thank you for coming out with us today. The breakfast briefings provide a forum for citizens and officials to discuss public policy issues that affect all of our lives here in the New Orleans area. The bulk of BGR's work is the research that we do in our office and the monitoring that we conduct at 37 government entities across Orleans, Jefferson, and St. Tammany parishes. But our breakfast briefings give us the opportunity to connect with you, the citizens, in a direct way on the pressing issues here in our region. We welcome ideas for future breakfast briefing topics. There are suggestion cards on the tables and pens too, and so you can fill that information out and give them to the staff before you leave. The best way to stay on top of BGR events and research is to become a voting member of the organization. Membership support is essential for BGR's work to promote good government. And so if you're not already a member, we hope that you'll consider joining BGR, and on your table there are membership brochures that you can use for that purpose. We're excited to announce that for the first time, BGR will participate in the Greater New Orleans Foundation's Give NOLA Day. This is our community one-day online event to inspire people to give generously to the nonprofit organizations that make our region a stronger and healthier place. You can do so by, first of all, saving the date. It's Tuesday, May 5th, and I ask you to visit BGR's profile on givenola.org. And finally, we want to express our gratitude for IBERIABANK's generous sponsorship of BGR's Breakfast Briefing Series for 2015. In particular, I want to thank the President and CEO of IBERIABANK, Mr. Darrell Bird, and I want to thank his team here at IBERIABANK for their generosity. They have been kind enough to host us in this very gracious space, and they have provided for us a very healthy and delicious breakfast. Now, for today's question and answer period, all questions we want you to submit in writing. There is paper and pens on the table, as I have mentioned. I would ask you to write legibly, and you may use your name if you would like to include that with your question. When you have your question ready, if you'll just raise your hand or your sheet, then someone from the staff will pick it up and we'll bring it up and put it into the queue for the question and answer period. And now to introduce our topic this morning and to moderate the question and answer portion of the program is Dennis Waltering. Dennis, as we all know, for many years sat in the anchor chair for WWL-TV, where he did a marvelous job over decades. He continues to give back to his community as a highly effective member of the BGR board. And so, Dennis, the podium is yours, sir.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. Nearly 3 years. That's how long it took to find a permanent school superintendent for Orleans Parish. The school board considered more than a dozen candidates before finally deciding unanimously on Henderson Lewis, Jr. Dr. Lewis was chosen in part for his local roots as well as his varied experience in education. Most recently, he served as superintendent of schools in East Feliciana Parish. He won 3 terms on the St. Bernard Parish School Board and still serves as a school board member there after re-election this past fall. Dr. Lewis also helped found a charter school, the Algiers Technology Academy, and he served as that school's first principal. He holds a master's degree and a doctorate in educational leadership. Today, Dr. Lewis joins us to discuss his plans for the Orleans Parish School Board. The board runs 6 traditional schools directly, oversees 14 charter schools, and acts as financial steward for public schools in the parish. Dr. Lewis, thanks for joining us and for sharing in detail some of your vision for Orleans Parish Schools.
Thank you and good morning. This morning, I'd like to begin by thanking IBERIABANK for being one of the sponsors for hosting the breakfast this morning. Also, BGR for the invitation to come and share with you my plan and my vision for the Orleans Parish School System. And not only my plan and vision for the Orleans Parish School System, but my plan and vision for public education in New Orleans. As I stand here this morning, I also stand to let you know that today is my 19th day on the job. However, I bring nearly 20 years of educational experience to the job. In my career, I've served as a teacher's aide, a classroom teacher for 7.5 years. I worked in the central office in St. Bernard Parish for 2 years. After Hurricane Katrina, just as schools were destroyed here in New Orleans, schools were destroyed in St. Bernard Parish. And so I was living in Atlanta at the time after Hurricane Katrina, but because of my dedication to the school system back home, I returned back to St. Bernard Parish in November of 2005 to open our unified school. Worked there, I taught high school mathematics once again. However, at the conclusion of that school year, I decided I wanted to have a larger role in the rebuild of St. Bernard. So at that time, I left St. Bernard and became an assistant principal in New Orleans. And as mentioned earlier, have been serving on the St. Bernard Parish School Board for the last 9 years. After serving in New Orleans for a total of 6 years as an assistant principal, and director of academics, I most recently served as the superintendent in East Feliciana Parish, a parish where there was little hope for public education, and a parish where all hope for public education was really gone. But I'm proud to stand this morning to say after 2.5 years of working with the community in East Feliciana Parish that we were able to restore hope. We were able to restore financial integrity as well as academic integrity. And now that school system, where in the past just exists, now in their mind, they're on the map. And today, it's good to be back at home to continue the work in education. If you will remember anything about me, before I even go into my presentation this morning, I will say this. My #1 priority for the last almost 20 years has been children. And my priority will continue to be children. So even as I navigate through the New Orleans landscape, always know that I will be making decisions that are in the best interest of our children, that I will be working day in and day out to unify our school system and have a school system where we truly have an understanding of what equity means, and a school system where everyone truly has access to a high-quality education, no matter what your zip code is. So prior to Hurricane Katrina, the Orleans Parish School System consisted of 64,000 students. It operated 125 schools, and we all know that the school system, according to the Louisiana Department of Education, was ranked as academically unacceptable. Today, we have 6 network schools, and you may see a different word from what you've used to hear over the last several years as direct run. We're no longer using the word direct run because as I stand here, I will tell you I'm not hired here to run those 6 schools. We hire principals to run those schools, and we hold them accountable, and we motivate them to do their very best. So we have 6 network schools. We have 14 charter schools that are part of the Orleans Parish School Board. Currently, we're ranked as an A school district. Our SPS is 109.2. We have a very high graduation rate, which is 89. Our ACT composite score is 19.9, and it exceeds the state average. Now, for many people, they may say that is wonderful. But as I share our 102.9, our letter grade of A, our graduation rate, and our ACT composite score, there are about 62 schools that we do not operate. And so even though we're very excited about OPSB and we're ranked number 2 in the state, we can't just be proud of that because we have 62 schools that we have no control over at this time. And so this is the work that I'm committed to at this point, to make sure that those 62 schools that are not a part of the Orleans Parish School Board, that they return. Yesterday was very historic for us. We had our first school in the 62 to get its approval by Betsy on yesterday to return for the fall semester. And I truly believe it's going to be one of many schools that will be able to return to the Orleans Parish School Board control. So prior to coming on board, I was able to do some research about the district. And in doing research, I was able to see what our existing strategic priorities are. These are priorities that the school system, that they believe in at this time. But what we're going to do under my administration, even as we look at dedicate maximum resources to classroom so that the Orleans Parish Schools will become a leader in the education innovations. What we're doing is we're really trying to give meaning to that priority. It's currently something that the school system believes in, but what I want to know, what are our action items that we are working towards every single day to make this to become a reality? Also, we will, just as it's a priority for the school system already, look at our accountability system. Being able to hold everyone accountable, from our charter schools to our network schools. Right now, there's a clear division between charter and network schools. What we're working on is creating a system of accountability that the same high standards that we hold in our charter schools to, we want to make sure that that's the same standards that we're holding our 6 network schools to at this time. And so what we're looking at is making sure that we have a school system where we can end the division. So that brings me to my entry plan. As I was going through my interview process, I was asked to put a plan together that would guide me through my first 180 days. And so I put a plan together that addresses 5 areas that we'll discuss this morning. The first area is governance. We have organizational structure, student achievement, operation and finance, and community and public relations. So our first area of governance, to develop a highly effective governance structure with a strong relationship of mutual respect between the superintendent and the school board so that the focus will remain on academic success for all children. So currently, in order to meet this goal in governance, we're working on developing a strategic plan. If I would ask anyone in the room today, if you can share with me, what are the goals for the Orleans Parish School Board for the next 5 years? I'm not sure exactly what I would get. And so we want to have a well-defined plan so that everyone will know where we're going in New Orleans for the next 5 years, have our goals, have our action items, and most importantly, timelines, because it's going to be so important for our community, our parents, our constituents, to be able to evaluate our progress over the next few years. So governance. I share with the board, if we are going to be able to govern, we have to be able to have the appropriate policies and procedures in place. In review of our currently policy manual, if you would take time to look at it, and also compare it to current state laws, what you will find is that our policy manual is outdated. So I'm very committed to making sure over the next several months between now and December that we do a massive overhaul of our policy manual. Because if we ever expect our school board members to govern effectively, we must make sure that they have the tools to be able to do so. For example, most recently, the information that you all may have been following in the news, you all know that we had to replace a school board member. And so I'm going to just share a conversation that I had with our board president at the time when all that was taking place. And I shared on that particular day that we would have 20 days to replace and fill that vacancy. However, when the school board members were able to get with our legal counsel, they found out that our current policy say that we had 10 days. And so again, the law changed, but we didn't update our policy to have the most current information before us. And the list goes on and on. So if we're going to be able to govern, we have to know and have the correct policies and procedures before us, and I'm very committed to that over the next several months to make sure that we have that. In addition to overhauling the policy manual, if you're trying to find out information on the school system and you go to our policy manual, you're going to have to go through those 600 pages to find out what you're looking for. Once we overhaul the manual, I'm going to go ahead and have an electronic system. So if you are interested in finding out what's our policy and procedure on our student activity accounts, for example, what you would do is you would go to our policy manual and you will put keywords in, and every policy that relates to that particular item that you're looking for, it will pop up so we'll be able to research that particular policy. But also, I want to make our job a little easier for our board members. And so as we prepare for our committee meetings and our board meetings, I want to go to an electronic system where we have our board agendas, for example. If we have an item on the agenda, what I want is to be able to attach every single policy that relates to that item. So as board members in the community, as you all prepare for our upcoming meetings, you'll be able to see what policies relate to that item, and you'll have a better understanding of how our discussion is going to be guided around that particular item. So e-governance is very important to me because we live in a different day, and I want to be able to have information at the fingertip of our community, for our community members, as well as our board members, so that when we look at the area of governance, that we can truly govern and lead effectively. I was very intrigued by the accidental steward report that was done in 2013 by BGR. So as a result, what I've done with my transition team, we've met with our finance department to get an update from their perspective of the work that has been done since this report came out in reference to Orleans Parish as the accidental steward, the Orleans Parish school system as a school system that is operating a little differently from the way it's operated in the past. And so my next step as far as the BGR report is concerned is to meet with the staff here at BGR to find out the work that went into creating this report, to get their perspective, and then as the superintendent, my role is this: to take what the administration views as their reaction to what has been done over the last few years, and then to hear from BGR's perspective of the intent of the report, and that's going to allow me to navigate to determine how we will continue to respond to those items that have been listed in that particular report. We also are going to work on ongoing professional development for our school board members as well as our administration. Currently, my team, we're putting together a workshop and trainings around what's going to make us better. We know we have, with the most recent allegations and all those things in the news, we're going to do some training around ethics. We're going to do some training around anti-fraud, just so that our employees know what's their role. And even if the current school system is set up where people are afraid to be whistleblowers, for example, that we create an environment where people, if you feel that something is wrong, that you go ahead and you share the information, because if there is a thought of something that's not right, we need to investigate, because I'm truly committed to making sure that the trust that the community is having in us to do the right thing, that's what's going to be done, and we're going to do our very best every single day to make sure that's how we guide OPSB. Right now, our school leaders, what they're going to receive in the next few days, there was a state requirement for school systems to have on their websites, for example, how do you report fraud? Also, in every single school site, you're required to have posters that have that information on it as well. Where if you visit our facilities, you won't see that today. But next week, you will see that this is going to be another opportunity for us to comply with law so that it's visible for people to understand that in our school system, if you have concerns about any type of wrongdoing, that there is a hotline, it's visible, as well as training that you know how you're supposed to proceed. So again, not to say that our school system that we're not doing right. I want to be clear about that this morning. But I want to have a mechanism in place where people understand that we're about the right thing and we're about integrity day in and day out. So with our governance priorities, our progress up to date, I've had many opportunities to meet with our school board members one-on-one to talk about their vision for OPSB, their concerns, their priorities, being able to see where we have themes and commonalities there. Also, I've been listening over the last 19 days to our constituents, because I want to hear from the constituents what they feel has happened in the school district over the last several years, but most importantly, those things that they feel that are so important that must be addressed for us to become successful and move to the next level and the next layer of academic success in OPSB. I talked about our policy manual, and over the next several months, we're going to update that so we can have a solid policy manual and a governance structure so our school board members, so that they can govern effectively. And also, I mentioned and talked about the last layer of just making sure that every layer of our organization, from our internal controls to our fiscal management, that we have proper procedures in place so that when it comes down to the dollars that flow through the school system, we know exactly how they flow, and that it continues to flow in a way that we are doing the right thing and being good stewards of the public's dollars. The next layer is our organizational structure, and that's to examine the current organizational hierarchy and its effectiveness in preparation for transition the district to a method of portfolio management. If you look at our school system today, you would know that it's not the same school system that we had pre-Katrina when we had 125 schools. We have a school system today where the majority of our schools are charter schools. As I mentioned earlier, we're transitioning our direct run schools to network schools and giving those principals more autonomy. That's a different structure for us. And with that being said, we have to look at our current structure in our central office. And the question that I have right now is the structure that we have at central office, is it meeting the needs of the type of school system that we have? And I'll tell you my initial answer, it's no. Because we're operating a school system where our charter schools, they run their operation. However, we have a nice-sized academic department. That's one example I want to use. So we need to look at every position that we have in the academic department, in our finance department, and the list goes on, to every single department we have, and we have to test it against the type of school system that we have today and determine, is that the right position for our current structure, but also to determine if we have the right individual in that position. And so over the next several weeks, we will finalize that process. We will create a reorganization plan that will set us up for portfolio management to manage different types of schools. For example, I mentioned that MLK is coming back to us as a charter school, but even though it's coming back to us as a charter school, the parameters for MLK, those are not the same parameters that we have for our Type 1 schools. For MLK, they will still manage their title funds, for example. That will not have to go through OPSB. And so this gives you an idea of when we talk about portfolio management, that we'll have all different types of schools under one umbrella that we're operating. And so we have to figure out, how do you operate a school system where it's not a cookie-cutter model? And so in this particular goal of mine of an organizational structure, we need to develop what we will consider to be our portfolio management organization. So our priorities with the organizational structure, I'm meeting with department heads to get a better idea of the function of their department, the function of every single job in that department, so we can see what the current practices are and determine if those, number one, if those practices are correct, but number two, to see what jobs possibly can be eliminated. So, and that's gauged by its effectiveness, its functionality, and efficiency. So we will restructure where necessary, and once this process is over, we will see Orleans Parish School Board as a portfolio management organization. So today, where we are in terms of it, my transition team, we are working with those department heads, but also we're looking at a third party to give us another set of eyes of all the departments that we have in those functions, so that we can truly analyze OPSB's function and make some sound decisions of how our new structure should look. In addition to looking at those positions, the ultimate goal in this process is this: to find ways to cut back on our expenses so that we are able to push more money to schools and to be able to help the work on the front line, because we all know that the work happens in our schools. We have about 85 general fund positions that are paid through our central office. That's not including some other positions that are grant funded, but we have 85 positions of our overall general fund budget. That's about, I believe, about $54 million. We have 85 positions that we have to look at critically to see definitely if those positions are needed. And again, if they're not, let's restructure and get more money to our schools. That's going to be our commitment in the area of organizational structure. Operations and finance. We're going through a process to scrutinize the district's effective utilization of our financial resources to provide a quality and equitable education while maintaining our fiduciary responsibility. So in this area, and it connects to what I just mentioned about our organization structure, because my entire plan is interconnected. So we're looking at our budgets, our audits, and I commend OPSB for the last several years of having great audits, but also when it comes down to even our bond debt, that OPSB has worked aggressively over the last several years to reduce that bond debt, and eventually within the next 5 to 6 years, being able to be a debt-free organization. That's a huge accomplishment for OPSB, that a school system that in many years past have had many issues when it came down to money. And so as you can see, We're very solid. Our bond rating is, I believe, it's something like AAA minus, a rating, something along those lines, and so we're very proud of that. But also, we have our charter schools that pay us an administration fee of 2%. And so what we're looking at is, I'm currently looking at how we're utilizing that 2%, making sure that the school leaders clearly know where their money is going, but also not only to make them aware of what we're doing with their 2%, but making sure that they feel good about OPS being in our operation and how we are supporting them. We're also reviewing all of the current contracts. We want to make sure that if we have a contract for services that have been provided for OPSB, that not only do we have a contract in place, but I'm more concerned about the effectiveness of the services. Looking at if it's something along academics, how has this increased student achievement? And if we have a contract that just been existing for years and we don't see any results from it, then we need to question that and possibly end that contract. And also for our disadvantaged business enterprise, our DBE program, looking at the effectiveness of that program. Right now, we have a program that is up to 35% for our minority contractors. But it's a great program, but I will stand here today as I speak about our DBE program, and we want to make sure that it's going to be effective and remain effective and that we improve it. But also, I want for our DBE program to have a contractor that's a good contractor, an excellent contractor that happens to be a DBE. So I want everyone to understand when it comes down to our program, we're about excellence in everything. So we will be true to our DBE program, but we're going to be true to excellence at the same time. So our progress towards operation and finance. We are working on an internal audit. If you've been following this in the news, our board members request that the Inspector General will come and actually at this point to do a financial audit. And speaking with the Inspector General, in speaking with him, that is a function that he will not be able to provide for us at this time. However, we have reached out to our legislative auditors, and we will be working with them to have an audit taking place in addition to our annual audit that we go through the school system each and every year with our normal firm. This particular audit, we will make sure that we pay attention to all of our internal controls, our payroll procedures. We know we have a lot of money flowing through the district at this time for construction, so making sure that they look at our practices that are in place, and even with the funding, that's through FEMA, and so there's a lot of scrutiny that's already happening, but we want to just have some extra eyes on our finances, our internal control, our procurement process, to, once again, to reassure the public that your public dollars, that we're doing the right thing, and that if we have internal controls that we need to modify, that we modify those internal controls so that we can strengthen our operations and finance department for OPSB. Now, even though my plan, we talk about various areas, one of the main areas is student achievement. And we want to align our efforts in providing a quality education for all students in order to meet the goal of graduating all students college and career ready. Many times when you hear college and career ready, people will automatically think you're saying college or career ready. But we want to make sure for our students that are graduates of the Orleans Parish school system that they graduate college and career ready. So if our students, through our Jumpstart program, my vision is this. If a student is interested in becoming an engineer, that their high school elective courses that they can take will help them not only spark their interest in engineering, but also provide them some practical experiences in that area and leave high school with some type of industry-based certification so that if a student decides not to go into college, that we have prepared them for the workforce. But also that same student in our schools being able to take those additional courses, also to not miss out on their TOPS eligibility requirements, to be able to leave high school eligible for TOPS, leave high school with an industry-based certification so that if you have to work your way through school, you have a certification that can help you gain employment, that's gainful employment that you can make a decent salary. But also, again, if you decide not to go on, you can make enough money to take care of a family. That's our obligation here in New Orleans. So our Jump Start program is not where it needs to be, but I will say over the next several weeks, we will be reaching out to our business community as we strengthen the Jump Start program, which is a requirement by the state to make sure that all students leave college and career ready. For our priorities for student achievement, we're looking at our academic programs across the board. We're also looking at our lowest performing schools and looking at the root causes in those schools and being able to establish a turnaround zone. Right now, we're spending a lot of time at McDonald 35 to restore excellence at that school that has a phenomenal history in the city of New Orleans. And so we are working day in and day out to make sure that we can get 35, the academy and the high school, at a different level. We're also looking at our teacher effectiveness. All teachers have to be evaluated, but more importantly for me is the evaluation of our teachers versus how their students are performing. If you have teachers who are rated very, very highly effective and the students are not progressing, we need to look at that, and that's what we're doing. So we're visiting schools, doing walkthroughs, and also meeting with principals one-on-one to have conversations with them to really get an understanding of what they vision for OPSB over the next several years. Our last area is community and public relations. And it's so important because we want to rebuild the public's confidence in the public school system. And the way we do that, we cover everything that I talked about this morning. Every single area that I discussed is important to us so that we can rebuild the public's confidence in our overall school system and be able to have our schools return to us just like MLK did yesterday. So my priorities and my progress up to date, I've had the opportunity over the last 19 days to visit 9 of our OPSB network charter schools, including RSD charter schools. I participated in about 8 interviews, conducted internal reviews with our district public relationship protocols to make sure that those protocols are changed and that we make our protocols even better. I'm planning community meetings, meeting with elected officials to make sure that even as we go into the next legislative session, that we protect public education here in New Orleans. Anytime there's an event that whether it's RSD, OPSB, or any other affiliated charter school or organization, I make sure that I put those items on my agenda to visit them as well. And over the next several weeks, what we want to do is not only to meet with our constituents, but also have board members to conduct town hall meetings so that constituents can give them updates on their particular areas, but also have an opportunity to give a progress report on our plan. And so my timeline for my entry plan, you have it before you. The first phase is diagnose. That's a lot of listening just to see what's going on, watching, and then based on what I see, we're going to prescribe a plan for action. After we prescribe that plan, we're going to actually implement the plan, and then we're going to evaluate our effectiveness, and that's going to get us through the first 180 days. Again, as superintendent of OPSB, I'm committed to reuniting our school system as a whole, Just as we experienced a historic day on yesterday for MLK to return, looking forward to next spring to see more schools return. But in the meantime, we're going to work collaboratively with the RESD to make sure that we build an infrastructure for schools to be able to return, because I truly believe that the work that we're doing here for OPSB in the city of New Orleans will allow our schools to return, and we want to make sure that we have an infrastructure so if the state says one day that they will return all schools to OPSB, just as pre-Katrina we had 125 schools, if the state decides in the future to return all those schools back to us, that we create an infrastructure that is able to receive each and every one of them. And just as we're so proud of OPSB today as being number 2 in the state, that once all the schools are returned back to us in the future, that we still can remain proud for OPSB, that we can continue to run an effective school district for the city of New Orleans. So again, I thank you for your time, your attention, and listening to me on this morning as I share with you my vision for OPSB as well as my 180-day plan. So thank you very much.
Dr. Lewis, thank you very much. We have a number of questions. I want to start out with one. I mean, you seem to be focused on integrity, in improving ethics, the understanding of ethics among school board members, among the school district. How important is ethics, integrity, and assuring the public that the money is being spent the way they want it spent? How important is that to getting the schools returned from the RSD?
Thank you. I believe it's very important because, again, as we talk about building a portfolio management organization, we have schools that will be operating their own dollars, and so we must make sure that as we have our schools that are operating their own dollars, that we have mechanisms in place to support them, as well as the operation that we'll have on OPSB to make sure that we're doing the right thing as far as the money that we have been entrusted to run a central office operation. And so if we're going to be effective, we have to have integrity with every single dollar that the public has entrusted into us, because we know that just as the money flows to the school district, that millages come up for renewal, and if we're not doing the right thing, then we jeopardize the renewal of those funds. So it's very important.
Can you hear me? I don't think I need a mic to speak. Okay. Can you hear me, everyone? I don't want to get in Dr. Lewis's way. How is the return of the RSD schools in the best interest of the children?
It's in the best interest of the children for several reasons. The first is that the Orleans Parish School Board is the elected body of public education and is the binding authority for public education in New Orleans. And if we are going to continue to operate a fragmented system, use transportation, for example, eventually we have to come up with a plan on how to address transportation, because we are spending so many dollars year after year transporting kids all over the city. And so we're going to have to look at more, we call them catchment right now, but attendance zone. And so if we have a fragmented system, that conversation is a little harder versus if we had one system where we can actually work together and do what's best for, like, transportation, for example. So I think for children, it's going to be best that the all schools eventually return back to the Orleans Parish School Board.
Dr. Lewis, what are your thoughts about Common Core?
Yes, so we know most recently in the media we hear a lot about Common Core. As an educator, I will tell you I will always stand up for higher standards for children. I will say that the implementation of our current Common Core standards for the state, the implementation, in my opinion, has not been the best implementation. It's my understanding that in our state we are working with the State Department as superintendent to possibly create some higher standards for Louisiana, and I'm in total support of higher standards for all children. Our own curriculum for the state of Louisiana, where we are helping our students to not only compete across the state, not only compete across the nation, but globally, as well as have and create an assessment that will effectively measure our student success in these higher standards.
Someone wants to know, to what extent do you expect the limited number of school facilities to limit the number of new charter schools?
So currently, what I've asked is to get a list of all of our facilities. I've just recently spoke with my leadership team in reference to the master plan. We know that that was last updated 3 years ago, and some things have changed. So my plan at this point is to revisit the master plan along with the RSD to see where we are, look at schools that have come back, look at our vacant buildings that we have, and determine what's going to be our course of action, because we know we have more families returning. And so we want to create a school system where we will be able to have buildings and schools to support all of our students.
Dr. Lewis, what is the portfolio management type of governance, and how does the community fit into that?
So portfolio management, as I mentioned earlier this morning, we're not your traditional school district, and so what we have to determine are going to be what are those metrics that we are going to be able to support schools with and be able to hold schools accountable. So for example, in portfolio management in the area of academics, it will not look like the normal way that we operate under academics. For example, right now we have a central office, and a lot of the support is coming out of the central office versus under portfolio management, I run my school. We're having struggles with A, B, C, and D, and under portfolio management, those particular schools will come back to the district office and buy those services back from us because they have the need for it. Certain schools will not need all the services that we provide, and so we will have a variety of services that we'll be offering to our schools, and under portfolio management, schools will have the option to buy those services, and the community's role in that is that as I complete my reorganization, we will get to a point of having a position that looks at community engagement to be able to engage our community in our school system, because if we don't have someone working solely on community engagement and bringing the community in and giving us the input, then as we create this portfolio management structure, then we left a huge segment out. And so as we go through the next several months, we will build this portfolio management structure, and this structure will be able to include all of us, because this is what we're going to have to live by.
Right. Sort of a follow-up on that, someone wants to know, can you give an example of an organization today that is using the portfolio management style?
There are a few charter schools. We know that in Louisiana, we are one of few that's really on the front line of creating the wave of the future for public education. So what I'm looking at right now, I had some opportunity to speak with the individual that has done some of the portfolio management pieces for the RSD, who's no longer a part of the RSD, but also we're looking at some national experts to actually give us and help us through the process as we develop what our portfolio management department is going to look like. But just most recently, a former representative from the Recovery School District, as they shared with me the portfolio management piece that they actually created.
With a focus on student achievement, what steps will you take to increase access to pre-K and move OPSB schools to one app?
Yes, so we know that we have to get as many of our students involved in school as soon as we possibly can. And with our state initiative, we will be working with our early childhood centers across the city to make sure that we have a unified preschool program, whether they're coming to us or whether they're going to a daycare center. With our new state initiative, we're going to partner with those daycare centers to have a unified program. And what was the other part to that?
And it was
One app.
OPSB to one app.
Yes. So currently with One App, I'm studying the concerns that are in place for One App. I know we have some of our schools and many of my schools that are part of OPSB that are not part of the One App program. I will be in conversation with my school leaders to hear what their concerns are with One App. I know one thing we have, even with our selective admission schools, the timeline for One App and the timeline that they currently have, those two are not in sync. But I will say this, I believe that there's a mechanism where my schools that are currently not a part of One App, that we can transition them into One App or whatever the centralized enrollment system is, but have it such that everyone's personal needs are met in that, because the ultimate goal of One App is this, is that we can centralize our enrollment, and even as we have schools that a parent may be able to get in school, number one, but a parent has also was able to get into maybe a few of our schools that are not part of One App, and so that child, he or she, has a seat. But also just to make sure the parent, they will cover their bases, and so they've also enrolled in some of our schools that are part of One App. And so what is happening now is we have students who, I'll just say Ben Franklin, for example. Student may be at Ben Franklin, but we also gave that child a seat at another school. And until we're able to rectify those sheets, we have a seat at another school that's being taken by someone who we know is not going to attend. And so we know that there's a process we have to go through, because we want to make sure that we can, as soon as we possibly can, make sure that students know what schools they're going to, but also not only where they're going, to make sure that we're not having where we have all these seats that are full, in actuality that they're not. And so I believe at the end of the day, there's a structure, if we work together, there's a structure that we can put in place where everybody can be happy concerning this centralized enrollment process. But it all is going to happen around having conversation and meeting the needs of all the schools that's involved.
Dr. Lewis, a question from Maria V. Most of our children living in extreme poverty get lots of suspensions and expelled from schools. What would you do to stop suspensions for disobedience? How would you help these children to graduate?
So many of our students, they come to us and they're not behaving as a model student. But also as a school leader, I always look at my school culture and make sure that there's a culture that addresses students that are coming to school not being able to fit into a certain mold. And we have to make sure that our school leaders, that they're working with our students, that they're working with our families to make sure that if you have a student that's in a short period of time, for example, have had multiple suspensions, what are we doing as a school system to help that student become successful? As a former charter school principal, I was the principal that recognized that many of my students came to me over age. And I know that if you're over age, you're looking at, as far as high school is concerned, that, the light at the end of the tunnel is too far away from me, so I'm going to do this for a while, but eventually I'm just going to drop out or move on. But I was the principal that saw I had a large population of students that was in that category. And so what I did as a principal is I created what I had an intermediate academy. And with that program, it looked at my overage students. It allowed them, where my other students were able to get 8 credits during the school year, my overage students, because they came to school, they stayed after hours. We also had Saturday school, and what we did, we created opportunities for them to gain additional credits. And so that student who is behind and almost 17 or is 17, we gave them an opportunity to work very, very hard to get their high school diploma by finishing their coursework, because now the state has given us the opportunity that if a student is able to master content, they no longer have to meet the seat time requirement that was something in the past. And so we can motivate our students that if you really want this, we will work hard with you, we'll work hard with the family to get it done and be able to create those opportunities. And many of our schools in the city right now, they're doing that. But also I want to make sure that I look at my schools on the OPSB where we have a large population that fits that particular category, that we go ahead and we do something about it so that those same students will have the opportunity, instead of finishing high school in 4 years because you're behind, that they can finish it in a short period of time.
Having the dollar following the child is important for special education and other benefits for students. How will you address this in Orleans Parish schools?
So we all know that the amount of money that it takes to educate a student is allocated by the state, and also we are moving our local dollars. But we also know that for our special education students, that's not enough. And so we will be looking at different tiers of funding so that our students and our schools that are educating special ed students, that they have the appropriate amount of money to be able to educate their students. And so making sure that when we talk about equity, equity is not necessary that everyone gets the same amount of money. But equity also means that you are able to meet the needs of every single person. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to work to get a structure in place where we're able to meet the needs of all of our students, especially our students who are coming to us through our exceptional student services. And again, as a principal, I was a principal in my first year of having a school of only 150 students. But when you had students at your school that were under special education, if that child needed a paraprofessional because they was in their IEP, as the school leader, I was required to have it. And so having a small school, having limited resources, I felt it firsthand, the struggle that I had to go through to make sure that I can ensure that what was required of me, I was able to do, because we all know only a limited amount of dollars flow through the door, and that's what you have to be able to educate. So to make sure that we're doing right by all students, and in this particular question, our special education students, we need to look at our funding formula for those students who we know it costs more to educate, and also our state has recognized that, and our state is looking at other ways to give you your base amount, and then for students for your special population to give you additional dollars to support those students as well.
Katie Walmsley asks, do you have a vision for how to fully integrate the Orleans Parish school system with full equity and inclusiveness without expanding selective enrollment offerings?
Yes, I truly believe that OPSB is successful. It's going in the right direction, but selective admission, I believe that's appropriate in the school system we have. But I will stand here today to say that just as we have selective admission schools, we have schools that are not, that are doing well. And I believe in this market that we have today, that we are able to have schools where we don't necessarily have to have selective admission schools to remain successful. I truly believe that once we continue to create great schools, and we have great school leaders and teachers, that no matter who comes through the door, as long as we're given the proper tools that we need as educators, that we will educate everyone to their fullest potential. So those students who are coming to us gifted and talented, and they may be attending some of our selective admission schools, our obligation is to help them go and grow to the next level. And those students who are coming below level and may not be attending one of our selective admission schools, we have the same mission to make sure that we allow our students who are coming to us to grow to the next level, no matter what's the starting point. And so that's where I stand on that.
Dr. Lewis, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you one final question, because you talked about central office and possible layoffs. That was the understanding there. How many layoffs do you anticipate?
So again, as I look at our current structure, my first glance at our central staff is that we're overstaffed. Because I have not fully gone through the process of fully evaluating all positions, I cannot put a number to that. However, what I can stand here today to say is that whatever the number is going to be, I can assure you that the structure that we're going to recommend to the board is going to be a structure that actually sets up Orleans Parish School Board as a portfolio management district.